as we roll into 2021, I am sharing a message from 2010. This was recorded in tandem with Dawn Woyak, and she and I attended a 4-hour workshop, and then we came back and we ended up being a 1 hour and 13-minute summary of the workshop. I wanted to share it for a variety of reasons, one of the most important of which is the material in here is great. It's from Henry Cloud and John Townsend, the authors of Boundaries. And we summarized their 4-hour workshop in 1 hour and 13 minutes. And on the other hand, it illustrates a key principle. Attending something and learning it so you can teach it, what we call the Sensei mentality. Walk a path in such a manner that you can show others the way. So you want to learn it as though you are going to turn right around and teach it. So it is a great illustration of she and I both doing that, and then she and I partnering together to share the material. So enjoy the content, enjoy how powerful the content is, but also consider the principles it is illustrating as you have two people who attended a workshop 1 day earlier now summarizing that workshop, and consider how that would change the way you paid attention if you knew you were going to come out and someone else was going to be waiting for you to share your insights, not just whether it was good or not, but to actually give you a summary of the material. How would that change how you approach material? So again, this is Scott Conway and Dawn Woyak from 2010, having attended a seminar with Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend called Men and Women. It's not that complicated.
Okay, welcome to Agathos Ministries for the equipping of the saints for the work of ministries. I am Pastor Scott Conway.
And I am Dawn Conway, his wife.
And we are here today to share an experience we had yesterday. We attended the Dr. Henry Cloud, Dr. John Townsend seminar up at Mariners Church entitled Men and Women. It's just not that complicated. Now, a little bit about Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend is they are best known for their book series called Boundaries. Boundaries was the name of their book. They have boundaries for teens, boundaries in marriage, boundaries for children. So there's a lot of books in this boundary series. It's one of their core teachings. When you hear people citing people on establishing boundaries, very often they're citing Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend. Dawn and I watched Gary Smalley in a video series that was from the 90s. And Gary Smalley was teaching on boundaries and cited Cloud and Townsend in his teaching as being the source for his boundaries teaching. So that was excellent instruction. Boundaries is the first book I read of theirs. I'll have Dawn tell you her introduction to Cloud and Townsend for a moment, because her introduction was a different book many, many years before I met her.
Mm-hmm. I had originally heard of Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend in the mid-90s, 96 or 97, I think is when it was. I went to Mothers of Preschoolers, or a MOPS convention in Chicago, and they, at that time, had written the Boundaries for Kids and the Growing Great Kids series, and they were there to speak at that convention, and I heard them speak, I think 96 or 97 is when I heard them speak. And then about that same time is when I went into counseling for the first time, and the lady that I was counseling with had told me about, and I had seen it at the convention. I may have actually even bought this book and left it on my shelf until after I had gone through the first section of my counseling. It's called The Mom Factor. It's the title of the book underneath says, "Discover how to transform the effects of the past, say no to your mom without feeling guilty, build a healthy relationship with your mom, and improve all of your relationships." And I've always said that the two of these men were the first people in my life that made me think I wasn't crazy, because they related how I was feeling to where the things came from and gave you ways to get out of it or to deal with it in a really healthy and productive way. So I've been reading their material. I went through the list of their 26 books together with Aaron, how many I had read, and it's a pretty significant chunk of their books that I have read. So.
And I was actually introduced to Cloud and Townsend by Dawn not that long ago, actually. That I've always had a backed up list of books to read, and so when she originally suggested I read the Cloud and Townsend book, I thought, okay, so where in my list am I going to put those? But she got me copies of the books and gave them to me and talked to me about how much their books had impacted her life, and so I prioritized it, and I've read 3 of their Boundaries books and gone over some of their other material, so I was very happy to go with her to the seminar and attend it together. And we are actually have one of their books is one of our household reading. That Dawn's reading one of their books right now.
I've talked about it to some of you here before. It's 9 Things You Simply Must Do to Succeed in Love and Life, and it's only by Henry Cloud. He wrote this by himself. And I actually got this while I was getting something else off of Amazon, but because I love him so much, and he had cited it in some of his Facebook posts, that I got this one and started reading it one day when I was getting my hair done and kept texting Scott quotes out of it. And I'm still, 3 or 4 weeks later, I'm only in chapter 3 of it because I keep rereading the same things and taking notes out of it as they're applicable to my life, because it's a really, really super good book. And again, he in particular, because I've read more of his individual stuff than the 2 of them combined, he gets to the why behind. As I was thinking about it last night, why do I like this so much? Because I've seen other marriage stuff, I've read other, self-help stuff and personal growth stuff, but he seems to get behind the beliefs and the why, not just addressing behaviors. And that's why I like it so much. And even as much material as I've read, he seems to find like missing pieces and underlying principles that a lot of other self-help people don't address, in my opinion.
So that's a little bit about who these gentlemen are. The seminar took place yesterday up in Mariners Church in Irvine. We drove up there to attend it. And it's entitled Men and Women, It's Just Not That Complicated. And it was a 4-hour seminar. We're not going to spend 4 hours summarizing the 4-hour seminar. I personally was very, very happy that we got to attend with our 11-year-old son, Aaron, that he got to go with us. He wanted to attend and learn some of the stuff. He got a few key insights himself. One of the things I always say, if you go to a seminar and you get one good thing out of the seminar that can make a significant difference in your life, you have invested your time and your money wisely. Our 15-year-old son also would have joined us had he been in town, but he was actually out of state at the time. More specifically, he was on his way flying back into town as the seminar was coming to an end. So he would have attended with us had he been in town. So it would have been nice to have Austin there. I'm sure he'll be with us on the next time we get to attend something and he's invited. So ladies and gentlemen, a quick summary, relatively speaking, of Men and Women. It's just not that complicated. Dawn.
Another thing I want to add about these guys, they've known each other. They're in their 50s. They were college roommates. And when they went to school for psychology, they're Christian psychologists. And in the introduction yesterday, the man that introduced them said that they wanted to transform Christian psychology is what their goal was when they started. And I really seriously think that they have. But they've been together and been writing books and been friends since college. And it was really fun. They tag team taught this. They'd each go through a section or two, and then they'd switch out. And so it was kind of like 2 different people's perspectives, but teaching the same thing in 2 different ways to present. So I really liked it. The first thing that they went through was safety of relationships. And the one thing that I liked so much, and he addresses this, Henry Cloud addresses this in the nine Things You Simply Must Do, is when you find an issue in a relationship, that you not to run from it, but to receive it and move towards finding the answers and finding the solutions and where the bottom of the beliefs lie in order to build the intimacy. The natural, normal thing is when you find something scary, you want to run away from it. You want to hide, you want to get rid of it as quickly as possible, but that they really advocate moving toward building that intimacy. That he described if you think of a column, or a box that had layers to it of a relationship or a person, that everyone has the surface layer up at the top, and then all of the deeper stuff is down below, and everyone kind of resides up at the top level of that and never goes into the deeper issues, into the deeper things that are in their heart. And that unless you go down into that lower levels of that box, that you can't build really intimate relationships, because it's working through that stuff and fully knowing the person that you're with that the intimacy comes from.
Okay, on needs and brokenness, which was their second issue in session 1, one of the things they talked about is how well do you express your needs? And the converse of that is how well can you hear your partner expressing your partner's needs? Because if you can't express your needs, if you don't know how to communicate them, if you don't know how to hear someone else's needs, or worse, their needs just don't matter, then that tells you that you're not dealing with them as a human being. And you want to look at what is the need behind the conflict. What are you feeling? What are you really feeling? Not what are you angry about now, what's at the surface, but what's going on behind that. And getting to the need that is behind the conflict. One of the examples that they used several times was a couple was originally arguing over finances. On the surface, it was an attack. You're irresponsible. How could you do this? And when he would stop, in this case the woman, from just attacking him and say, well, what are you feeling? How does that make you feel when he does that? Then she just broke down in tears crying. And when he realized, I'm making her feel insecure. I'm triggering all of her memories of when she was young, when she had an alcoholic father and the bills weren't getting paid and stuff was getting shut out and they were in danger of being evicted and all of those things. And I'm making her feel that all over again. It shifted his thinking. Now, when he was just being attacked, he was being defensive. Once she learned to communicate from her feelings and communicate from her needs, he was much more receptive than being attacked. Now, admittedly, not everybody is good at receiving somebody else's needs. A lot of people, frankly, don't care what you need. They only care what they need. But you're going to get a better reception communicating where you are and how you feel and what you need than you will just assaulting the other person. Because if you attack them, they'll defend themselves.
One of the other things he said was that you need to take ownership of your needs. They're your needs. They're things that came with you into that relationship. They a lot of times came from your family of origin, and if you don't take responsibility and ownership for them and talk to the person that you're with, they can't never know, and they can't fully know you, and it can never be addressed. And one of the Dr. Townsend said to go into conversations with, to have your partner, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, anyone that you're relating to, know that I am for us and I am for you. I want this to be better for both of us. I want the best for you, and to make that really clear up front and be the premise of conversations that you have with people. So I think I got everything out of there.
And independence and separateness. Why don't you launch on that one?
Independence and separateness. Their little visual of this is that if you are Velcroed to someone, that is not love. There is no such thing as Velcro love. That you have to have independence and separateness as a person and within the relationship. That you're not glued together all the time. That you have time away with friends or your own personal growth, your own Bible study. That you have individual things that you pursue, that you're not just stuck together all of the time. And the cool thing that they said in this one that I really liked, most situations you see where the guys go do their guy things and the girls go do their girl things or whatever, is it's kind of like a tolerance of it, and you go, okay, yeah, go do whatever and just come back, and I don't want to hear about it. But they actually advocate celebrating the time that that person has away as building their individuality, growing the depth of the relationship, and really, really being happy and celebrate the time that they have away and what they do, and ask them questions, tell them what they did, be excited about the time that they had away from you to learn and to grow as an individual.
Yeah, they also said to calendar your independence time, calendar those girls' nights out, calendar the guys' nights out, calendar your away time. Is one of the challenges they noted is when this time just catches people by surprise, when they just feel like you're trying to abandon them, then there's a greater tendency to feel more resentful. But if they know this is on the schedule, every Thursday night is bowling with the guys, and that, on Tuesday I'm going to go out and, have my girls' night out. That if it's on the calendar, people know when it's going to happen. It doesn't feel like you're walking out on the relationship to go do something, because they know this is a regular thing, maybe every week, maybe every month, on some kind of a planned schedule.
And they said if you have an issue with that if you feel abandoned, if you feel pain to just this really huge depth in your soul when your spouse goes to do something without you, you probably have an issue from your family of origin or something that happened in your past, and you should not feel that way. You should want the best for your relationship and for your spouse, and to dig into that if you do, that controlling a man will drive him away, and that freedom and independence and separateness will create passion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so part of our teaching, that's part of polarity. It's the difference that attracts the people together, the positive and negative poles on a magnet that just pulls the magnet together. And the same thing happens with people, too. One of the things I'd like to note is they suggested on some of these, just rate your relationship 1 to 10. For us, we do a relationship quantifier that goes from negative 10 to positive 10. So if it's a negative number, that means, okay, we're really bad at this. We need to improve just to not be doing damage in this area. A positive number means, well, at least, it's positive. Maybe it's not a great positive, but it's not doing damage. A 0 is just neutral. Yeah, it's there. A 10 is it's great. Negative 10 means someone's dying here. Could be physically dying. It could be spiritually dying. It could be emotionally dying. But there's bad stuff going on.
And they even advocate a couple times a week. Check in with your partner. Probably not huge in depth, because you'd have to calendar that time, but to check in on after certain events, how certain things are doing, but just to check in on a pretty consistent basis, which was a little bit new to me, to have it done that often, 2 or 3 times a week.
Yeah, certainly that's something that Dawn and I talk about on a fairly regular basis, but to hear it advocated from the platform, that was pretty nice, actually. And one of the things about that they say to check in is there's certain types of events that are frequently triggers. And when those types of things go on, just check in on them. If there's something with the kids and that you routinely will argue about the kids, if there's something going on at work, in-laws was a big one too. So check in with each other and see how they're doing. And then later on they give a great key to that. The issue of imperfections and failure. Our version of this is a guaranteed lack of perfection. Why don't you jump in on what they had to teach about that?
Their version of it is to make a promise and tell your partner that I will let you down, that it is just going to happen and that you will let them down. And he went through the difference between perfectionism and perfect, which was exactly what we did a couple weeks this month in Agathos, with the perfect meaning mature and complete, and he gave the biblical definition of the mature and the complete, and that perfectionism is not what you're looking for. That the culture and the media are obsessed with it, but it just can't be obtained, and that you have to have the right to make mistakes, and that you embrace what isn't flawless in yourself and in others. And that you are going to let someone down. I can read some more.
Yeah, one of the things they said is the happiest people don't make comparisons. Now, does that mean that you don't know? It's like, well, this person's taller than you. That person wears red, and you don't wear red as often. That's not the kind of comparisons they're talking about. The happiest people don't make value judgments based on the comparisons. They don't say, well, she's a better person because, if you could be more like him, then you'd be a better husband. If you could be more, that person, you're bad because, and all of those kind of comparisons where you're judging based on the comparisons. It says happy people don't do that. And one of the things actually they noted, which I thought was a little cute, is happy people are just a little bit psychotic. What he means by that is psychosis is by definition being detached from reality. And so a positive psychosis is, you just kind of overlook at some of the negative stuff. Like, well, yeah, objectively, you might be able to make a logical analysis that this is better than that, and that, you'd rather have the this than the that you have. But that happy people have just enough psychosis to just ignore all of that and just be happy with what they've got.
They talked about normalizing that you have issues, that everybody has them, and don't take it to the the all or nothing kind of thinking, that if you have an issue that, oh, I'm completely broken, I'm completely ravaged, and nothing's ever going to be right about me, but to normalize that you have issues. And Dr. Townsend said, play the My 3 Issues game with your partner, that you write down what your 3 biggest issues are and what you think theirs are, and then you compare notes and see if your reality lines up with your spouse's reality and vice versa of what there is. He also advocated, which kind of leads to what Scott teaches on courting and pre-courting, is to, if you're single or dating, make a list of the things that you can live with. That's normalizing it, that not anyone's going to be perfect, but normalize that in your own mind, that these are things I can live with and these are things that I cannot when you're dating, so that if they're there, you recognize them, they're normal to the person you're in a relationship with. If they go beyond what you can't stand and you're not going to do, then you move on to the
and your standards self-select. Yeah. Let them self-select out based on your standards rather than reject the person. On the My 3 Issues, Dr. Townsend is the one who came up with that game. You need a certain level of security in your relationship to do that without a therapist or without a counselor. If you do have that level of connection and trust, you can do that. Because you can imagine someone says, well, I think your top 3 issues are this, and you look at it like, what? What are you talking? And you can imagine the fight that could trigger if you don't already have a solid relationship. So, some of those things you might want to think about, is our relationship in a place that we can do this? Now, one of our favorite sections, be an adult.
Be an adult. The first thing that they hit on being adult is the intimacy and sex are what adults have. Children don't have that. And they even went so far as that children, by definition, until they're 18, are under guardians and managers. And when that is lifted is when they are free to engage in adult things, as even their opinions, that, like with our kids, that they have a say, but they don't have the veto power. When you're 18, then you can have the veto power of your own life. But the first thing they hit was the intimacy and sex are adult things.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I really liked about that is one of the things they noted is if you're not behaving like an adult, you can't really have true intimacy. Intimacy is a peer-based adult-to-adult relationship. I'm a whole mature adult, you're a whole mature adult, and that we connect in our mutual wholeness. It's not half and half make a whole. It's more multiplicative. So a whole person with a whole person makes a whole couple. That a half person with a half person makes a quarter couple. That you multiply your baggage if you bring it into a relationship. And part of being an adult, they said, is, the conflict management is an adult skill too. Mm-hmm. And one of the things you even mentioned about stuff to not do during the therapist, there might be certain conversations you do not have with your therapist because being able to resolve conflict is an adult skill, and there might not be any adults in this conversation. So you want to get to the therapist, so at least there's a grown-up there. And one of the things about being the adult is coming out of under the authority of your parents, stepping out, taking care of yourself. And one of the things that they noted that happens a lot is, that you hit the adult age and you ask for the freedom, you move out, you have your own place, you're supporting yourself, you're doing all the things, so on the outside you look like an independent adult. But on the inside, you're still connected primarily to your parents. And one of the things they said is never say that your parents are your best friends. That if your spouse, if your romantic partner can't be a better friend to you than your parent, then you're not ready for that relationship. That either you still need to do more of the leaving before you can do the cleaving, or you need to just mature some more. You need to grow up some more and be able to have a healthier, more mature relationship.
They addressed the leave and cleave as we do at Agathos. And they all went so far as to say that you need to get your parents out of your house or out of your head. That if there's something from your parents that's still stuck in your head, that you need to get rid of that. And that you can do the leave and cleave, making the new thing with your partner, with your spouse, and within your family, without your parents' consent. Because there are some parents that just won't let go. And you need to, as the adult, take that stand and take that initiative towards your spouse and leave your family of origin behind.
Yeah, and a couple of things related to that. One of the things that they actually suggested you do is while you're sitting down with your partner and your parents, at some point, disagree with your parents in defense of your partner and see what happens. Now, one of the interesting things is when they said that, you could just hear the whole audience is murmuring, oh my God, and you could just hear it rippling, and then he switched it around and says, now, What if you're the partner and you watch your husband or your wife stand up to their parents to defend you when they're being unfair to you? What would that do to you? You hear primarily women voice going, "Oh yeah," and Dr. Cloud, look like you had some notes. Yeah, I think that probably describes it better than I could. So guys, did you hear that? Pay attention to that. And then he went and sat down, and Dr. Townsend came out for his turn. But part of the idea there, where we teach the leave and cleave, and this mirrors their teaching, is if you're going to move out of your parents' house, what are you going to take with you? Are you going to take the trash? Are you going to take the clutter? Are you going to take things that don't belong to you? Are you going to take things you don't need? Or are you going to take the things that will be of use to you, the things that will help you? So if you think of it in terms very similar to physically moving out, you're not going to move out of your parents' house and go to the side yard and make sure you take up all of the weeds, and so you can plant weeds at your new house. You're not going to go rummaging through the trash cans, so don't throw out any garbage for a couple of weeks. I want to take that to my new house. You're not going to do stuff like that. So you want to learn the good things, and you want to leave behind the bad things. And since nobody's perfect, there will be good things and bad things too. And one of the ironies, very often when you're young, what you end up doing is you keep rejecting all the good things too. Mm-hmm. So you want to learn the good things, take those with you, and then you adopt them as yourself. The idea of get your parents out of your head is you grow up, the mature things that you know you can take in your life, you learn from your parents, that becomes yours now. And then the other stuff that aren't things you want to have in your life, that aren't things you want to duplicate to your children, you leave those behind.
They also covered in this section the mother and father roles of you as a mother and you as a father have to have a place where they're out of the us of your relationship. And John Roseman also says that. And I've known people that didn't want to have children because they disagreed on who should be the central relationship in their family, that the wife thought that the children should always be first, and the husband thought that no, and it was how they were raised. It was their family of origin stuff, that his parents' marriage was the central relationship. And they said that I put my glasses on, sorry, that your role as a spouse cannot be smaller than your role as a parent. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, yes.
Yeah, your parent role cannot be bigger than your role as a spouse in your relationship and in your family.
Okay, now to wrap up, there's session 1 on structure. They say time and space. You need to structure time to build intimacy. That very often, especially once you have children, it's very easy to lose all of that time. Very often when people get busy at work, it's easy to lose that time. You have to build it in and make sure you have time to connect. You have time to be intimate. And one of the things they also suggest is create some non-activity space where you're not always doing something, where you have a chance to talk and connect heart to heart.
I leaned over at this part and talked to Aaron in his ear. I said, when you get married, you'll have to make sure that you do this intentionally, because they said that some people have to intentionalize it, some people are just good at it naturally. But I told Aaron, I said, in our relationship, Scott's and my relationship, we have Tuesday and Thursday nights where the kids are with their dad, and every other weekend, so we have a 50-50 split. And so we have that time, and it's automatically created. But if you have a full-time household of kids where you don't have a timeshare with a parent, another divorced parent, you'll have to create that and make sure that you do have time away from your kids and time alone.
Now, session 2 went into 2 sections. Now, actually, I'm going to kind of dwell a little bit on the first part, and we're going to speed up a little bit as we go. It's on communication. The first session on communication was a presumption. It says the backdrop of it is presuming good hearts. I mean, they were very upfront saying all these communication techniques, they don't work if you have a bad heart, if you have a toxic heart, if you're overtly selfish, if you're only in it for yourself. No amount of technique can overcome bad character. They said very often communication problems are not communication problems, they're character problems. When someone says, well, she won't listen to me, what they really mean is, I want to berate her, insult her, and judge her, and she won't sit there and take it. And she keeps arguing with me when I'm trying to tell her how lousy and worthless she is. That's a character issue, that's not a communication issue. But in the presumption of the good heart. So if the issue is a bad heart or a toxic heart or even a wounded heart, then you're getting into kind of therapy level of interventions. If you have two good hearts, people that mean well, people who really love each other, and our definition of love is, if I love you, I want what's good for you. In fact, ideally, I want what's best for you. If I love you, but I just want to possess you, I want to own you, I want to control you, and it's not for your benefit, it's for what I want, that's not love. That's selfishness. You're treating someone like an object that you see at the store and you just want to buy. So communication that leads to connection.
The first thing they covered was listen and make sure the other person feels understood. Sound familiar to anybody? And the one thing I told Aaron, and he got, and I told him, you can carry this into other relationships right now. You don't have to wait till you're married or in dating or whatever, is lots of problems are solved when someone shuts up and listens. That if you just seek to understand someone and validate them and let them know that you understand what they're saying, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them. You can completely disagree, but as long as they feel that you're understanding of their point of view.
Yeah, our teaching of this is understand, define, then be understood. So if I'm trying to do a conflict resolution, the first thing I'm going to do is ask each person what the other person's point of view is. How do they see it? And can you express it to me in a way that if I take your expression of their point to them, they'll agree that, yes, that really is their point, that is their reality. Some of the things in understanding, people want empathy. They want to know that you know how they feel. They want validation, that they want to be told that, yes, how you feel makes sense, that I can understand how you would feel that way. They want understanding, that you've really heard them out. You see where they're coming from. And that they want identification. They want someone that can identify with them and can see that, yes, you are a person, people do go through this, and especially when it's someone who's been through something similar to that. So in the define part of understand, define, be understood, is what do you mean by that? It's startling to me how many disagreements we're able to resolve by looking at the definition of the term. You know, we resolved an issue with the band by looking at their definition of rehearsal. We resolved an issue with a couple when they were arguing over respect and disrespect. We just inserted an extra term there of lack of respect. And they both instantly agreed, yes, that's what we're talking about. And okay, well, now the argument's over. Now what's the actual issue that we can solve? Use I before you or we, meaning talk about how you feel. So if I'm having an issue with someone, I talk about, this is what I feel. This is how it makes me feel. This is how I see it. These are my needs. Before you go to the you of, well, you're doing this and you're being that, and you, or even the we. And the we is, well, we have a problem. So, well, do we have a problem or do I have a problem? And that most of what we say about you is really about me anyway. So express your feelings first.
The third thing was connect when things are going well, not just in problems. And that was part of the always talking, structuring the time for communicating and intimacy building and talking, because emotions aren't going to let you talk about really important things when things are going bad. But if you can talk about things when things are going well, not just in times of problems, you'll build that intimacy and the relationship deeper. He talked about having a relationships with people 1,000,000 miles wide and 2 inches deep versus relationships that go down into deep buckets. I thought that was a cool metaphor to use.
Yep, and with that as well, a lot of times people will only talk because there's a problem. That, you know, when the classic one is the woman shows up in front of the television interrupting the Super Bowl and says, we need to talk. Why? Well, usually it's because there's a problem. One of the issues of the we need to talk is, well, if you haven't been talking when there are no problems, you're going to end up having to talk because there's problems. And if you can connect when things are going well, instead of waiting for problems, you can actually forestall a lot of problems. Just take the initiative in communication. Now, in taking the initiative in communication, there's never, they say, a 50-50 balance. There's usually one person who does most of the pursuit for communication and someone else who is pursued on the communication. Sometimes it's because someone's busy. Sometimes it's because it's whoever sees the problem. And that's normal. But when it hits about the 80-20 split, when someone's doing about 4 times as much of the pursuit of communication than the other person, whoever has the lesser level of communication really needs to take the initiative to start off with the communication. Because if you let yourself get into a habit of hiding from the communication, you're always going to be running from your partner.
And he equated, rather than running, to do a mutual chase, that you're both chasing after the intimacy that you want rather than running from. The fifth one was convey that intimacy is your highest goal, and that it's not about getting sex, it's not about getting what you want, but it's about what's best for your relationship and building what we call there is no space, that you're committed to, and this is where he reiterated that, to say that you're for us, I'm for you, I'm for the relationship, and that to always remember that sometimes we don't hear well because we bring our emotional pain and our emotional brain that's attached to the things of our past or the pains that we have had, our prior traumas and stuff, into our conversation, and to realize that your reality isn't necessarily what's going on, but that your emotional brain and your pain is part of those conversations.
Yeah, just understand that the facts may be the facts, but what the facts mean may be totally different in each person's head. I also talked about vulnerability leads to passion. When she feels needed, it opens up something in her. In this particular story, what they had talked about is there was a man who felt like what really got women attracted to him in general, and his wife in particular, was when he was strong, when he was powerful, when he was successful. And that when he felt weak, he felt unattractive. And in the counseling session, he kept saying, but I'm not desirable, I'm not desirable, I'm not desirable. And she kept saying, like, you don't understand. What you think turns me off turns me on. That she kept trying to convey to him, like, when I feel needed by you, I don't just feel like I'm an accessory in your life, that I'm superfluous, that you handle life, and I'm just sort of off on the side for you to kind of pick up whenever I'm a good accessory to you. So that doesn't turn me on. Knowing that you need me, that when things are going bad, that I can make a difference for you. It makes me feel like I'm a participant in all of this. And so that idea of vulnerability leads to passion. More specifically, vulnerability leads to intimacy. Mm-hmm. That if you can't see where you're needed, if you can't see where your partner is human, where they're less than this machine, then it's hard to connect with them and relate with them as a human being.
Number 7 in this part was how to speak from one gender to the other, process and specificity. And this was where he talked about, the men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and that doesn't really fly as much with them because they think that there's more overlap, and I kind of agree, with men and women than trying to make it these entities that you can never understand and that you can never get, but that there is way more overlap, but you have to just learn about the things that are different and learn their languages, that women are more like experiential and in the moment, and that men need facts and specifics and goals and tasks, but that there's not as little overlap as some teachers want to make seem.
Yeah, some of the things that the men are from Mars and women are from Venus, part of the reason that teaching is so popular is it's not very difficult for me to understand the same things about her. So I don't have to figure out, it's like, well, how do your feet work? How do your arms work? How do your eyes work? Because that's the same on both sides. The confusing parts is the different parts of how does that work? Why does that work that way? Where we both see things the same, we think the same, that's easy to figure out. But where we see things differently, and we sometimes in the middle of the exact same situation, seeing it completely opposite sometimes, that's the part where you want to understand. And it's how to speak from one gender to another and understand that when you're doing this, that you're specifically learning that individual as an individual. The broad brushstrokes of general maledom to general femaledom gives you more of a starting point. But that there's a lot of men that have a lot of Venus in them. There's a lot of men who have a lot of Mars in them. And the way we teach in Complete and Unleashed is that true masculinity has to have 2/3 masculine energy, 1/3 feminine energy. True femininity needs to have 2/3 feminine energy, 1/3 masculine energy. So there's going to be a lot of overlap there. It's just which direction do you generally skew.
The next section on communication was communication that leads to stuckness, repetition, or disaster. And it's this list of things that you are not supposed to say or do during communication. First being saying you never or you always. These huge generalizations will cause the person that you're communicating to push back, because there is always an exception, and they believe that they are the exception. So to say you never or you always shuts down the communication and makes them push back right away. They recommended that you say, in my experience, there is a pattern, and then to be ready with some examples of what that pattern is in your experience with them. And if you can get the judge out of the way, you can see reality. I think it was Dr. Townsend that said that everyone has a judge that's inside their head, and if you can get that judge out of the way, that you can see the reality of the situation better.
And by the way, that judge principle works in both directions. That if you're judging someone negatively, then there's a tendency to not really take a good, clean look at the facts. But same thing if you judge something positively, there's also a tendency to not take a good, clean look at the facts. You want to say, oh, no, that's all right. The other person is the problem. Well, sometimes if the other person's not the problem, you're actually setting up your partner to run into that problem again and again and again. Mm-hmm. So just get the judge out of the way completely, look for the patterns, and take action on the patterns. Another thing they said is a stuckness repetition and a huge disaster builder is impossible or unclear requirements for change. That the more global your requirement, the harder it is to make a change. If someone says, well, you're just so immature, you need to grow up. Like, okay, what does that mean? How do you know if you're doing it? And how do you know what they mean? So you have to get away from the global, because global is not actionable. You have to be very specific, something actionable, something objective, something measurable, so they know, well, what exactly do you mean by that? What mature or irresponsible, or what exactly are we talking? Can you give me 3 examples? And then if you get a clean, solid example, so you know, okay, that I can do. So it's not a broad, general irresponsibility. You want the bills paid on time. Okay, I can do the bills paid on time. But if I don't know what you're talking about with these huge brushstrokes, then I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
With the huge, broad generalizations, Dr. Cloud said that it causes 3 Ps. It causes your partner to personalize it, that it's all about them and that they're bad, and this will tap into the emotional brain and the traumas or issues from their past that are hidden. 2, it's pervasive. They all of a sudden go to the all or nothing thing, and that I will never get the hang of anything. I suck at everything. Everything is so bad. And number 3, it makes it permanent. That they'll get the idea that they'll never change because it's just this overarching you never, you always, and it's not actionable. That was the key word, was it has to be broken down into specifics that can be actionable and something can happen for them.
Now, one of the things they talked about in I'll treat you like you treat me. Now, I'll treat you like you treat me is in their category of leads to stuckness, repetition, or disaster. What it says, don't play fair. Do not be fair. And we'll put that in the quotes. As one of the things they talk about is when you're being fair, that means I'll treat you well if you're treating me well. If you treat me poorly, I'll treat you poorly. Well, one of the things we teach is negative is 4 times more powerful than positive. And if that's true, that means that the pain someone feels is going to be magnified over the pain someone thought they inflicted. The person inflicting the pain doesn't think it was that big a deal, but the person receiving the pain thinks it's a huge deal. So when they're going to be fair and treat them like they were treated, are they going to respond based on what the other person thought they did? Or are they going to respond based upon what they experienced? They're going to respond on their experience. Well, then the other person is, well, you blew that all out of proportion. And so one person says, I just threw this tiny little pebble at you, and you threw this big rock at me. The other person said, what are you talking about? I threw this big rock at you over the tiny pebble. You threw a big rock at me first. And I only responded with a tiny. I was being reasonable. And then that goes in this endless spiral down. Mm-hmm. On the other end, if you always be what he called the redemptive agent, that apply the law of grace, try to overcome evil with good, try to overcome the bad stuff by bringing in good stuff. So when it gets knocked down, you try to lift it up. And if they keep knocking it, you keep trying to be that redemptive agent to lift it up. So if someone has a bad day at work and they come home snitty because of something that happened at work, and then you respond back snitty because they were snitty with you, that's not helping. That's knocking it down. If you know something bad happened, ask them, how do you feel? Did something happen today?
Mm-hmm. Rather than that, the next one was having the saint and the sinner in your relationship. And this is that one of you is the sinner and can never do anything right and has all the issues and is so stuck, and the other one is church-going and faithful and reads their Bible and is self-righteous. And he told a story of someone that he saw in a counseling session, and this woman is going on and on and on about how she goes to Bible study and she does this and she takes care of everything, and her husband is bad at this and he's bad at this and he can't do anything right. And he looked at her and said, I totally understand. I just feel so bad. He said, I totally understand where you're coming from. If I had to live with you, I would be tempted to be a sinner too. And it just shut her up. That there are no saints and sinners, that we all have stuff and that we all have feelings, and that you just have to deal with it. And that if anyone's old enough to remember, some of you are not probably, that he said that there can be no parent-child roles in relationships and no church lady. Dana Carvey, church lady from Saturday Night Live, that there cannot be any church lady roles in your relationship.
Yeah, now, related to Satan Sinner, something that we teach is, I've never met a person who claims to be perfect. And so even the saint will say, well, I'm not perfect, but. I say, okay, well, can you tell me 3 specific things you're not perfect at? Very often, they don't want to cop to a specific wrong. They just want to cop to a generic lack of perfection, but they don't want to ever admit that this might be one of those. The number 5 on our list is allowing your codependency to run the conversation. Because a codependent person needs needy people. And because they need needy people, they want to be the rescuer. They want to be the one to be the hero. And they don't realize sometimes, or sometimes they do realize, that they're leaving the person in the victim position. They're leaving the other person weak and immature and incapable, and they're actually feeding their neediness. They're feeding their inability to grow up.
They state that grown-ups are mutual, and that you should state clearly to the person that needs help that you love them, but you cannot be the rescuer, and that you have to help them, but not enable them. He even said that to say that you love them and change the conversation. If it just keeps going to how much they need your help, that you love them and that you listen to them, but you move on and even change the conversation to something else, so that you're not constantly trapped in that person's codependency.
Okay, devaluing and defensiveness. Now, this was a huge topic, and I was running out of space for my notes on this. But one of the things I'm going to note is they cited that Dr. Gottman on defensiveness is one of the top 4 behaviors that are predictors of divorce. And so if someone is getting defensive, if someone is showing contempt, if someone is being judgmental, or if someone is just unplugging from communication, that they said there's about a 92% chance that relationship will end in divorce in the next 7 years if they don't do something to change that pattern. So this is significant. When someone's getting defensive, someone's showing contempt for another human being, you're being judgmental, which means that's part of the you always, you never, you ascribe to their character, the things that they do. And the unplugging part is where you just disconnect, you just dismiss the other person, that you just don't think that they matter at all to you in this. And so to address some of that, we'll do the defensiveness first and come back to devaluing. That defensiveness is when you are protecting yourself, when you realize you're having an emotional reaction that you want to counter, you want to play the victim, you want to do something to make the attack stop, or what you perceive as attack. They say to learn to tune in to your physiological reaction, that flash of chemical you feel in your body that tells you you're getting ready to fight, or you're getting ready to run, or you're just kind of freezing and you're not engaging anymore, and tune into that. So when you feel defensive and you feel like you're ready to stand up and fight back, they say, find your mental off switch and shut up and listen. And, obviously using that vocabulary, you can tell that they're being very firm about that. They're not saying, well, maybe you should consider not talking quite so much. They say, shut up and listen to what the other person has to say. Really listen.
Their definition of devaluing is an active process of taking away value of the person or an issue so that you don't feel less. That you have to, it's that whole cutting down thing, that making what they think, what they feel, who they are, less important because you don't want to feel less important. And Dr. Cloud was really firm, and I completely agree with him from experiences in my life, that he said, be deathly afraid of devaluing what your spouse is saying or feeling. And he went into the whole scriptural aspect of the hope deferred, that you cannot take someone's hope away. And when you devalue someone, that's actually what you're doing, and that it makes the heart sick. And then it's at that point that some relationships are not retrievable and not fixable, because the hope is so gone, and you've devalued and taken so much away from that person.
Yeah, that it's so important to treasure the other person, to treasure their thoughts, treasure their feelings. You may not agree with them. They may come from a completely different point of view, but so long as you're dealing with that good heart, where you're dealing with a fundamentally decent person, they're not being tremendously selfish, they're not being evil, they're not being malicious, they're not being, like you're owning a possession or an accessory in their life, but there's a significant difference of opinion to value that. That if both of you always agree on everything, one of you is completely unnecessary.
You better do this one because I was gone for that first part.
Okay, well, then they went into a hard topic, and we're going to glance over this one quickly. Cheating and affairs, prevention and cure. And they only had 3 quick lessons on this one. Why they happen. Two basic reasons they say affairs happen. One is the character of the cheater. They say, a lot of times they'll get people in their offices and say, well, but she wasn't meeting my needs. To which they say, okay, so are you saying that every man whose needs are not being fully met by his wife ought to go cheat? Well, that answer obviously is going to be a no. It says for everyone who uses that as an excuse, there's 10,000 people in a marriage relationship who are not having all of their needs met all of the time that are not cheating. It says, so the first thing you look at is a character. And be redemptive, even when it's not great. Just accept the fact your needs aren't always going to be met. There's going to be seasons sometimes that last more than just, on a daily basis, where there's some major thing going on. Sometimes it can be a period of years. I mean, imagine if you have a 2-year-old and a newborn. The wife can't be expected to fulfill 100% of all the needs she could of her husband when there were no children. And he hopefully is being a father raising his children, not just being the breadwinner coming in and wondering, why are you so tired all the time? The second reason affairs happen is breaking point. Talked about a vacuum in the relationship. Now, related to the character of the cheater, is that sometimes this starts off the same way, but it's to a point where no reasonable person should be expected to last forever in a vacuum. That everyone has to understand that not all of your needs are going to be met all of the time. But at the same time, the flip side of that is nobody should be expected to live in a vacuum, be pushed to a breaking point, and not have something bad happen. It says it might be an affair, it might be a divorce, it might be a breakup, it might be some form of separation, but that there is a breaking point. And that when you think you're in danger of getting anywhere near a breaking point is take it to the relationship and you actively try to fill the vacuum in the relationship. And, if you back into the good heart situation, most partners will reciprocate in whatever way they're able to. And you basically, what we say is you do your part. You do everything you can on your side to make it as right as you know how. And hope that your partner is going to respond to you. That if you let the vacuum go and you don't even try and you're not doing your part, well, then you're responsible for part of the vacuum. You're letting yourself be pushed to the breaking point, and then we're back to number 1, the character of the cheater. Now, what you can do to prevent them, one of them is refuse to allow space where you do not know your partner's inner world. Now, one of the things that we teach is about what percentage of life that is. That every human being encounters maybe 1 million bits of information in a day. We process about 2,000 of those bits of information that we need to interact with. But you still have about 50,000 thoughts, feelings, impressions, flashes of this or that occur just inside yourself every single day that comprise your whole inner world. And that world in your partner is what you want to try to know as best as you can and connect in that spot. That if you come to your partner with, I want to know you, understand that we don't live in vacuums very long, and you don't want to let a vacuum develop. And know your partner's triggers. Know what will set your partner off. That we all have the things that most set us off. Some people have more triggers than others. Some people have more dramatic triggers than others. Some have more common triggers than others. But everyone has the things that trigger them the most. You want to know what those triggers are in both directions and use the positive triggers. Avoid the negative triggers. And be an advocate for growth for both of you. Now, what you can do to resolve them. One of the things that they said is, the cheating victim needs to get healed. Very often the cheating victim is so filled with this, self-righteous anger at the cheater, and quite reasonably so, that they forget that they need help too, that they need to find a way to grow past all of this if they want to stay in the relationship. Otherwise, they could end up living in a perpetual punitive state where they're always punishing their partner in some way. To guard your heart and to de-invest from needing them. That one of the things when you've been cheated on, when someone has betrayed you, to be more specific, we'll use betrayal, because not for everyone is sexual infidelity the ultimate betrayal. For some people, sexual infidelity is like 3rd, 5th, 7th on the list, but there's other betrayals. That when you felt betrayed, you need to guard your heart, and that means you may need to de-invest in your cheater for a period of time until you can learn to trust them again. Love is free.
Trust is earned.
Trust is earned. Love is free, trust is earned. And you may require abstinence and process. And since this was Dawn's quote, she said was worth the price of the entire seminar, I'll have her give the quote.
This was totally, I underlined it, started, and turned to him and said, this was worth $65 for a couple and $35 for an individual to go to this conference. It was worth like millions of dollars more than that. Dr. Townsend said that if you've gone through infidelity or betrayal with someone, and I relate this to any relationship in life, and not necessarily that something bad has happened, he said to look at your spouse and say, I don't want you coping, I want you transforming. And it still just hits me just to say it out loud, that you can't go through life just coping with your problems and barely getting by, that you have to be in a process of growth and learning and continually moving forward. And I told Scott that he used the ing endings too, because it's not a destination. It's a continuous thing to maintain transforming mode in your life and to keep moving forward. That was worth the money and the drive and all of the traffic right there to me.
Together, I don't want you coping, I want you transforming. It's not just enough for you to not be destroyed getting through it. I want you to be transforming into something or someone that can completely overcome this. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, Dr. Cloud and Dr. Townsend are most famous for their boundary series of books, and they talked a bit about boundaries, optional and critical boundaries. And since I handled most of the last section, we'll have Dawn jump in with this section.
Optional boundaries are considered those things that are like preferences and styles and differences from each other that you should have grace for and understanding, and that it's not to be things that are not to be moralized. Like, even in a non-relationship context, in religious circles where drinking is made or dancing is made or movies or whatever are made into a moral stand, that optional things should not be moralize, that you can learn about why they have the view that they have, to discuss things, to respect the other person, that there's preferences and styles that everyone will have, and that every relationship needs room for the I, the you, and the we in it. There's optional things of your resources versus other people's resources, whether they be energy or emotional or learning. He has tons more time to read and stuff than I do because he's at home, and it's what he does for his better part of the day, where I'm in a dentist's office and I can't really read and listen to the things that he listens to. The third thing that's optional is going the third mile to demonstrate love and grace. And he said, if you have not gone the third mile, that you have no right to set limits on someone. If you have not extended the grace and extended the mercy and been understanding and had discussions with people, you have no right to set boundaries and make things right and wrong for someone else.
And keep in mind, that's on the optional boundaries, when it's a matter of preferences and style. But you've made all reasonable accommodation. You try to be as understanding as you can. You try to find that middle ground, and so you're trying to be as accommodating as you can and find that place where there's a balance. Because if you're not doing that, You can't just draw a hard line. Otherwise, you're just taking over and dominating, and to try something different. And one of the ideas here is that when people first learn to draw lines in life, to draw their boundaries and enforce them, they become no monsters. The idea being the no monsters, you just learn this idea that you can say no, and that some people then go say no to everything they want to say no to. And they're not going the third mile, they're not going the second mile, they're not even going 100 yards into the first mile anymore. They're just suddenly becoming these incredibly selfish, self-centered, totally self-absorbed no monsters. And so sometimes when they are first teaching people about setting boundaries, but they really don't want to be around these people for a while. And they try to caution people not to do that, but there's a tendency to go that way a lot. And they need to be reined in sometimes on the setting of boundaries. And part of the idea, though, is that third mile, of going that third mile. And events are not patterns.
Yeah, they suggested remembering that events are not patterns, that something can happen and you can get angry, want to pick a fight, whatever, but the events are not patterns, that things happen, and that if it is a pattern and it's a character issue, that it's a character issue is wiring in us that creates emotions and behaviors and patterns on the outside, but it's something inside, and that everything happens for a reason, and that if you do see a trend and that you do see a pattern in someone's behavior, that a trend is your friend, because it then gives you information to be able to address things in conversation and change things.
And to confirm the patterns, be ready with examples. Now, this was something that they talked about, finding the right one, boundaries on your time and energy. And this was specifically addressed to dating people. One of the things that they said is in this, and this is a general principle, be honest with a critical person and you'll never hear from them. And we talked about how that could even be a test to see, are they a person who is being critical now, or are they a critical person? That critical people don't want people to be honest with them. They just want people to shut up and be criticized and be torn down and be devalued. So just be honest with them. It says, but in finding the right one of the things it says is never reject anyone. You never reject anyone. You have your standards be what rejects them, and you have your standards let them self-select out of your life. And so it's not you saying, well, I don't like you because, it's like, no, this is the standard. If you will not live by this standard, then the answer is no. And that can be in any relationship. It can be parents with children, children with parents. It can be with friends. It's with workers. I mean, if you think about it as an employment thing, the boss says, you be here at 9. If you will not be here on time or even a few minutes early, then you can't work here. Can I count on you to be here by 9 o'clock every workday? The answer is either yes or no. And then what if you don't show up there by 9 o'clock on a workday? You violated the standard. You self-selected out. So that's part of how they say on finding the right one. They be the right one and have high, clear standards. That light attracts light, health attracts health. And that what you tolerate, you will get.
And that you are responsible for training people how they treat you. And that's a thing that I think that Gary Smalley talked about too. And that if you have come from a place of like not being able to set boundaries for people, that's kind of a scary thing, because I look at that and go, that's so hard. But if you train people how you want them to treat you by the boundaries that you lay, what you put up with, what you don't put up with, and if you're not good at it, it's a process. But I believe that that's very true.
Then critical boundaries. Critical areas, you should have zero tolerance. One thing they talk about, toxic patterns. When there's a pattern of abuse, when there's a pattern of great financial irresponsibility, when there's a pattern of deep selfishness, that you do not tolerate those things, you draw your boundaries clearly. Whenever it's something that's wrong or destructive, when it's deception. Now, this one is tricky for people because a lot of people don't feel like they're really being all that deceptive. I'm genuinely honest. But deception in a relationship, when it goes beyond the, oh, yeah, I guess that dress is nice on you, sort of the politeness, is so critical because the trust in the relationship gets shattered. When I can't count on what you tell me is true to actually be true, when I can't trust your words, then the next question is, what else is a lie? And so deception is a big one. Solid boundaries need to be drawn on deception, infidelity, addictions, abuse, alcoholism. And you have to draw clear boundaries when saying yes would enable someone to do their bad things. So if it will make them weak, if it will make them irresponsible, if it will make them immature, if you will create dependency, entitlement, it says then do not do it. So look out for those patterns as well.
I liked, he defined it clearly to me, because I have a hard time with like the codependency definition sometimes, but he said when your money, your energy, your time, and your patience creates an expectation or a dependency or a feeling of entitlement in that person, that's when you have to say no. I thought that was a really clear definition for me.
Okay, and then session 3, now we're doing a pretty good job. Session 3, the last hour, we've gone through 3 hours of their seminar so far. Session 3, affirm your connection verbally and do it face to face. Make it this a general habit, not just something that you do every once in a great while, like, oh, it's Valentine's Day. It is time for me to affirm my connection verbally and face to face. Make it normal. Relationships that last have that little bit of that psychotic skew to the loving and to the positive. So be able to laugh at limitations, laugh at the lack of flawlessness, affirm your connection. And they gave 3 basic things. 1, when it is not asked for. You don't just wait for it to be asked for. You don't wait for someone to ask you how you feel. You initiate telling them. Whenever it happens in the moment, so whenever you feel a sense of connection, affirm that immediately as soon as you have it. And what's especially important for that one is sometimes people don't know what creates that connection. They know what creates it for them. They don't know what always does it for you. And so if you tell them. In this particular one of the examples is one of the wives had been sharing that she felt most connected, most passionate, most turned on by her husband when she saw him giving the babies a bath. And she doesn't know why that was, but just seeing her husband like in that daddy role just made it like, oh, wow. And once he found that out, she said she had the cleanest kids in the city. But and to show gratitude later, too. That express the connection and show gratitude for that connection at later points in time. Because sometimes in the moment, people get the affirmation, but when they get affirmed on the same thing weeks or even months later, then it tells them this was so important to me that here we are 4 months later, I still remember this. Oh my God, just thinking about that is amazing.
And that's a principle that can be used with your children, with people you work with, people you train with, whatever. Number 2 is identify how the other feels loved and valued and do those things. They covered it pretty quickly. It's the love languages thing. Find out how your person that you're with feels love, how to do those things, what most impacts them, and do those things.
Yeah, if your spouse doesn't know, you cannot expect it. Don't expect them to read your mind. 3, make long-range stretch goals for your relationships that matter. Now, one of the things for dating relationships is that, have a go, no-go date. I was talking to one woman, said, I don't know if I should stay with this guy or not. We've been dating a while. He doesn't really seem to be moving forward. Well, how long have you been dating? 9 years. Like, okay, if after 9 years, he doesn't know if he wants to marry you, that's a pretty solid no, isn't it? So have a go, no-go date on that.
The one thing that he said about, I think it was Henry Cloud said, on the eternal dating thing, that it allows the person that doesn't want to commit to that relationship to stay as a kid. And I had never thought about that if you're not willing, the commitment, the relationship, the intimacy, marriage, those are those adult things. And if you just want to stay in that dating thing, that if you don't move forward, that eternal dating allows you to stay a kid.
And it said, nip problems in the bud. Yeah, basically, kill the dragon in the egg. When you see the beginnings of a pattern showing up, and it is a pattern, by checking in pretty regularly, seeing how things are going, and you see something's beginning to develop, get it while it's still small. Don't wait until it becomes a big problem and now it's damaging your relationship. So the sooner you can get to things that are clearly patterns, the better off you'll be. My general rule is if the same sort of thing comes up twice, I want to address it. By a third time, I assume we've got a pattern here, and I want to look for, what's driving this underneath?
And he addresses that from both people, that if issues and problems are not nipped in the bud by both people, that one person that doesn't handle stuff, the other person to them can become the fireman to put crises and fires out all the time, or look like a nagger, and you don't want that both people have to do it simultaneously. And a kind way to say, to bring something up that you might be hesitant about, they said, was to say to your spouse, you're not here right now, what's going on? Rather than say, what is wrong with you? But to say, you're not here right now, what's going on? I want you to be here with me now, what's going on?
And let's say you could accept the person without approving of the behavior. So just because someone does something you don't like, and again, remember, we're in the whole good hearts presumption that if you're dealing with a toxic heart, a bad heart, a selfish heart, says that's a different level of interaction. But when you have generally good hearts, accept the person without necessarily approving of their behavior. You might not like what they did or how they did it, but if you know that generally their intentions are good, it's a matter of style and such, that you can still accept the human being. You can understand that they aren't going to be exactly how you might always fantasize they would be. He says, small children see good equals gratify, bad equals deny. So you're good mommy if you give them what they want, and you're a bad mommy if you don't. And at some point, they start to get older and grow up and mature. They begin to integrate that and begin to realize that, good and bad isn't just defined by whether I get what I want and such. And so you want to get to that level where you don't think that they are bad because they didn't give you what you wanted.
And he said that it's a natural digression that you would go back to that kid kind of processing if you feel hurt. That it's a natural digression to go, oh, you're all bad or you're all good, rather than looking at just the issues. So that you have to be aware of that when you're hurt, not to digress to the kid land again.
Now, find the misery and make a rule. Now, I really like that one. That's also where the in-laws came up. You want to tackle that one?
The rules keep bad things from happening, and that if you find something that you're miserable about, find out why and change it and make a rule and stick to that. The example he gave was the woman that didn't ever want to go out to eat or dates with her husband because all he would do is sit there on his BlackBerry. They couldn't have a conversation. They couldn't do anything. That he was constantly BlackBerrying, even at dinner. And she said, "Why bother?" And so they just made the rule: no BlackBerries when we go out to eat or when we go to be together, whatever. That he couldn't, unless it was an emergency, a legitimate emergency, that he was not allowed to be on his thing. And that it's just as simple things as that. He talked about, Dr. Cloud, that he got where all of these speaking engagements, that it just got to be a misery for him when he saw one on the calendar that he just didn't like it, and he didn't want to have to go, and he said, but I like speaking, and he broke it all down to find what it was that he didn't like. And the three things were, he had all these extraneous meetings attached to it. The third one was his food.
Blood sugar.
He has a blood sugar issue, so he had to write into his contracts that they have to feed him. And then he put a no to all of the extra meetings, and I can't remember what the third one was, but it was just as simple as finding, it doesn't have to be a huge misery, but something that you just don't want to deal with, and it's too hard on the relationship, and just make a little rule about what will eliminate the misery.
Now, the third one was actually his own procrastination, that he was frequently scrambling even on the plane to put together the last of his speech, and said, okay, a week beforehand. Okay, the big rocks first. No choice choices. Part of no choice choices is there's some things that are already pre-decided. Like Dawn and I don't have to decide on Sunday, are we going to church? We already know every Sunday we're at church, and that's been true for us for years and years and years, unless there's a good reason not to. And if you just know all these things are just no choice choices. They're pre-decided. You don't wake up every day, every week and decide, am I going to work today? Am I going to feed my children today? And to calendar some of the big rocks first, the big things you're going to do, and make sure that those are covered. And then you fit everything else around the big necessities and make sure they get fit around.
Dr. Townsend's list of his big things are church, faith, personal growth, healthy friends, and service, defined as he is fulfilled by giving back to the community and to people that are around him. The goal in this one is to be the healthiest person that you can be, to feed into the relationships that you have. I say that because you're friends with your children, with whatever, but the main one being your intimate relationship. But to be the healthiest person that I can be, to feed into this relationship.
Yep, and the last outline point was take initiative and be what you want to receive. And this is their version of be worthy of what you want.
And they even suggested writing it down and that you take your list to a third party that knows you really well and to help you evaluate how you're doing with being that person, your trustworthiness, your honesty, whatever your big things that you think that you offer to someone, that to take it to a third party that you're not involved with to help you evaluate all of that.
And they finished up with vision. Have a vision for your relationship so that you look forward to being with someone. Part of it is intimacy. Intimacy is that deep connection, that deep sharing. Part of it is companionship, just having fun. A third thing in a marriage is building with, having something you and your spouse are partners in putting together. And then the final thing is sex and romance, which is one of the defining characteristics of marriage. But if you try to get to the sex and the romance without the intimacy and the companionship, and without having some common ground of something that you're both on the same team about, is that it gets superficial. And to build it down deep in all levels, you need to do all four. So that is our 1 hour and 13-minute summary of a 4-hour seminar by Dr. Dr. Henry Cloud and John Townsend. Men and women, it's just not that complicated. And thank you, Don. That was fun.
Welcome. Thanks.